What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of On Q. Rich Quinones is here, and appreciate everyone checking us out on the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. We're adding a couple new shows within the next week or so keep us locked and keep the subs coming and the support. Our good friend Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on this Thursday. We are presented by Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Road in Deptford, New Jersey. So as we kind of take a look around the NFL, we'll get to some of the rumors and some of the, I guess you can say, interesting stories with maybe Justin Fields, the rumors, Hardman leaking stuff with the Jets and then wanting to get out and go back to Kansas City, all that stuff. But we want to start kind of going down that path as we start breaking down these divisions, off-season needs. We'll start with the NFC East in our backyard. And let's actually start, if we can, with Washington and work our way up. Because there's been a lot of reports now that even though with new ownership, the Commanders, they might, I guess you can say, scare off some potential free agents or some potential draft picks, top 5, top 10, what have you, because of their, I guess you can say, the conditions within the facilities. And I'm wondering, how much credence do you believe is in that? And also, when you look at this team, I still think they might look at drafting a quarterback. I know there's some feelers out there for Sam Howell. We know they can run the ball a little bit with Robinson. They jettison their, I guess you can say, top 2 defensive players. But let's kind of talk about Washington right now. New ownership group. Obviously, they put together their coaching staff. Where are you right now with the Washington Commanders?
Well, when you look at the Washington Commanders, you have to think they're on the rise. There's nowhere to go but up. They've had a rough couple of years, and as you said, now they have Joshua Harris there as a new owner, and he's trying to clean up a lot of the Daniel Snyder mess and bring this team to the new. So we know Ron Rivera was a great veteran head coach, and it was his time to leave. The team underperformed last year and hadn't done much during his time. Bringing in head coach Dan Quinn, which was kind of interesting because given how Dallas kind of collapsed defensively at the end of the season, but Dan Quinn's coming in there as their head coach. He's bringing Cliff Kingsbury as offense coordinator. They threw the ball more than anybody last year. So, I would think with Cliff Kingsbury, they're going to throw it as well. Joe Witt's their defensive coordinator, a guy who's familiar with that Dan Quinn system, had a great job he did with the Dallas Cowboys DBs last year. So, in terms of this roster, it's going to be interesting, Q, because they have a lot of free agents and they got the second overall pick. I still think, Q, they got to find that definitive leader. They have not had a quarterback in place with this team in quite some time. Remember, they thought maybe it was RG3 and then Kirk Cousins. They kind of franchise tag back and forth with him. But Sam Howell, I just don't know if he's that front line guy to build the team around. So I think they're going to go quarterback and try to fix this offense. As you were saying earlier, there are some weapons on that offense. And then the defense, they put so many first round draft picks in that defense over the
Yeah.
years. They have to look at they have a lot of free agents on the defense. So they got to figure out, are they, number one, are they going to sign guys like Kendall Fuller, one of their starting cornerbacks? Got to figure out, is he coming back? A couple of their linebackers are also free agents. And then the cornerstone, obviously, is their defensive line with Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, who they've invested first rounders in. So a lot of talent there. But this team, as I said, they're in flux, looking up at the Eagles and the Cowboys. But if they get the right young quarterback in there, they can jump into the mix in this division.
There was a couple of fan polls. What should the Commanders do? And 29% said trade down, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. So Josh Harris has been part of their QB interviews at the Combine. And again, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to some of these quarterbacks, whether it's going to be Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Your guess is as good as mine. They rated the facility one of the worst in all of football. And, the other thing is jettison Eric Bieniemy, takes a job back in college. They had a pretty good passing offense early on last year. They never really got consistently going with the ground game. I'm the same boat with you. I I believe there are some teams that it's pretty evident and clear that they need a franchise quarterback. Washington is one of those teams. And, defensively, they got some pieces to work with. They do have some offensive players, but I also think you're in a tough division, right? We don't know what's going to go on with the Giants and some of their marquee players and Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. You got the Eagles in flux. You got the Dallas Cowboys, who are always winning in July and August, but never in January. So it could be a little sleeper team if you are Washington. And then that kind of leads us to the Giants. And listen, the Giants have question marks. There's thought that maybe they'll draft a quarterback. I don't see it happening. I think they invested way too much in Daniel Jones. It's unfortunate that the kid got injured, but fresh out of excuses, no more is this a year, is this a year, is this a year? Like, I'm tired of having that conversation. And quite frankly, at this point, I don't really care what they do with Saquon Barkley. I really don't. I broke down the numbers on this show in BYP. We understand offensively what they are when Saquon Barkley is on the field and the record that Daniel Jones has, but they still have, what are they going to do with Waller, right? I mean, he was supposed to be their big-time tight end target, and he got banged up. Robinson coming off that knee injury was superb. Hyatt, a rookie. They've got some playmakers. They've got a young defense, one of the youngest in the NFL, but I still believe it comes down to that coaching staff. I still believe it comes down to coaching. I think Brian Dable's on the hot seat, as crazy as it sounds, going in to next season. They are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because if you draft another quarterback and it doesn't work out, it's going to be 10 more years of bad football. Maybe that's an exaggeration. And then you got to deal with Saquon Barkley. You tag him, you let him walk, should have traded him in October. How much stock are we putting into that? I've said it for years. They have to fix the offensive line, say it ad nauseum, and then they have to get a legitimate pass rusher. Thibodeau's athletic, doesn't get to the quarterback nearly enough. And I know he's not a game wrecker yet. Lawrence is a run stopper. They've got some good defensive players in the secondary. So right now, biggest offseason need for the New York Giants.
Yeah, it's an interesting team because we know Brian Daboll, he was coach of the year, and then last year his unit struggled. And everybody will point to, it was the injury to Daniel Jones, their handpicked, quarterback. They gave him the big contract. But there was a lot more that need to be cleaned up with this team. And it's interesting you asked that. Obviously, offensive line Q always jumps out, and you just said that, but they've had so many years where they've had misses in terms of the guys they've taken in the first round. Think of Andrew Thomas, that left tackle, has kind of had some difficulty. Evan Neal, up and down career, another first rounder from the SEC. So I think finally they don't go offensive line this time. Joe Sheen is their general manager. Receiver could be an area. I know they took Jalen Hyatt last year. He's a guy who he has some game breaking ability, but receiver is an area where they need somebody to come in there. They really haven't had that frontline guy since Odell. That could be an area where they look to. You talked about the running back situation. I do not think Saquon Barkley is coming back for this team. $14 million is just too much of a price tag for running back. We're seeing it all around the league. There's probably 7 running backs that are free agent this offseason. I think he'll be one of them. So running back could be an area later in the draft that they go for. And you talked about the defensive secondary. They may need to get younger in a couple spots because they have 2 key free agents in Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney. So
got to re-sign McKinney. Or tag him. You have to. McKinney.
They got to get him back because he was a good draft pick for him. He's another young ascending player. Got to keep him in the unit. And so there's a lot of areas that the Giants could work with, but quarterback, it's going to be tricky because Daniel Jones, how soon is he coming back from that Achilles? Do you bring in a bridge guy? Tyrod Taylor, who's the backup right now, he's a free agent. And you have Tommy DeVito, obviously, he helped out some, but are you going to win games when you put him out there consistently? So
no.
Q, it's going to be, they have a lot of areas where they could go to, but this team, if you bring in a couple key free agents and you have a pretty good draft, they can jump right back in this mix and make the playoffs. So Joe Sheen got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, when you talk the offensive line, Thomas, all pro, but had the injury early when the season went off the rails against Dallas with the block field would totally change the complexion of their season. Neal's been hit or miss, but you go back to the Hernandez days, you go back to the Flowers days. I mean, for some reason, it's just bad talent evaluation. They can't assemble it. There are reports that they won't shy away from a quarterback with the number 6 pick. I mean, listen, if you have serious thoughts about taking quarterback, that's all well and good. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to select one. And I think you're being desperate if you're doing that. I mean, think about this. 2023 put them at the number 6 overall in 2024. Now, unless a team is absolutely positively resolute that they have their franchise quarterback, they know it for a fact in number 6, then you go with it. If not, if you have a little bit of doubt, you better think long and hard. And, I'm looking at the teams that need quarterbacks right now. Bears, Commanders, Patriots, pick 1, 2, and 3. So all 3 could take quarterbacks. If we just go by that, Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, let's just say they can be off the board. The Cardinals are number 4. The Chargers are number 5. They're not selecting a quarterback. Murray's in place. Justin Herbert's in place. Giants at 6. Titans at number 7 could be. And then the Falcons at number 8. And there's reports out they're looking for Justin Fields. So they're really in limbo, man, because they gave all that money to Daniel Jones based on that great year that he had. And this is what happens when you select, an unproven guy, quarterback, top 5, top 6. This is what happens when you select a running back, top 5, top 6, top 7. You're going to have to pay these guys. And if they're inconsistent, if there's injuries, it's going to set you back. And that's kind of where the Giants are. I'd be shocked. Listen, if Marvin Harrison Jr. was there, we know he's not going to be. I mean, let's be honest. You're going to probably give him a toy for Murray in Arizona. But I do believe that McKinney, yes, you got to take care of him. Dory Jackson can walk. He's battled some injuries. I'm fine with that. The offensive line, you can't expect guys like, Justin Pugh to come off the sofa and, kind of patchwork it together. So, I don't know. I mean, you really, you can't be in this spot where you gave Daniel Jones X amount of dollars and you're just going to stick with him to prove people wrong, because you shouldn't run a franchise like that. But man, if you draft a quarterback at 6 and they start 1-4 and Daniel Jones is not 100% and he's struggling, they're going to clamor for this kid. But yet you just gave Daniel Jones $160 million. So the good news is you can get out of that after next season. So maybe that is kind of the saving grace where they might select a quarterback number 6. They're still not ready to compete with Philadelphia, and they're not ready to compete with the Dallas Cowboys until they start to beat those teams consistently in the division. The Giants are a 5-6 win team, which brings us to the Dallas Cowboys. And, I think you and I thought that no matter what, after getting their doors blown off by Green Bay, get rid of the quarterback, go in a different direction, get rid of the head coach. That's not the case. I still think the Dallas Cowboys are a talented team. I just think there's something amiss when it comes to putting it all together and winning in January and winning late and winning in the crunch and then the clutch. And I just do not believe the head coach is the guy to get them to that next level. As a Giant fan, I'm sure as Eagles and Washington fans, they love the fact that McCarthy's coming back because they understand his inconsistencies, his deficiencies from a head coaching standpoint. But I still think this is an extremely talented team. If I said to you, hey, where do they need some, depth? What would you focus on, offensive side or the defensive side with the Cowboys?
Yeah, Q, the interesting thing with the Cowboys, obviously they're going to be picking later in the draft because they had a good record and they were in the playoffs, and McCarthy's only going to get them so far. He wins his 13 games a lot, and then he gets to the playoffs, and we know he lays an egg. So they have 2 new coordinators. You have Brian Schottenheimer coming over, trying to run the offense. That's going to be interesting. He's kind of a run the ball type of guy. And then you have Mike Zimmer coming back to the organization he pretty much started with way back in the day. He's going to be a defense coordinator. So Dallas, when I look at them, Q, they have talent on their roster, but it's aging talent. And We always talk about their offensive line was their strength, and Teron Smith is a free agent. He's very old at left tackle. We lots of injuries there with him. Their center Tyler latest. He's also a free agent. They got to figure out what to do with him. Zach Martin at right guard. He's a little bit older there. So that could be an area that they look at. Quarterback, everybody, just like McCarthy, everybody's always questioning his dad coming back. He's their guy. Stephen Jones, it was interesting because Stephen Jones is at the combine talking. Usually it's Jerry Jones. Stephen Jones, maybe he's moving a little bit more in that power seat with his father getting older. And he clearly said that Dak is their guy. So he'll be back. Running back, much like the Giants, is interesting because Tony Pollard is a free agent,
Yeah.
finally got his opportunity to be a lead back. But you wonder, is he that guy that's going to carry the mail? So running back could be a position, obviously not in the first round. We talked about teams are not doing that anymore. Defensively, on their defensive line, they could use some help. Jonathan Hankins, their nose tackle, is a little bit older, and he's a free agent. Demarcus Lawrence paid very well. Is he slowing down at defensive end? He could be someone to look at. Linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch he's always been their linchpin to their defense. He has a very bad neck injury that he's battling. And, with him being out, they're moving Michael Parsons all over. So, he would be better rushing the passer and instead of having to drop in the coverage. So lots of areas they can work with here, but I tend to think the Cowboys are going to go offensive line this draft.
So you mentioned Mike Zimmer, and if you think about it, that was pretty much a 1-year deal. Prove it. So you've got the entire coaching staff. You got Dak Prescott, the embattled franchise quarterback. These are all contract years in 2024. And to me, there's the pressure, right? The optics to win now. They've had 3 straight seasons where they won 12 or more games. They've managed just a 1-3 playoff record in that span. And then they got waxed by the upstart Green Bay Packers in a game where they let up close to 50 points. They lost 48-32. So I think if Prescott finds himself playing in a contract year, I just don't think that's ideal, right? Because listen, I don't think Trey Lance, who's sitting there as a backup, is the answer. I don't think you can win with Dak. I think you can be very competitive. We've seen it, but I also think you've got issues with the head coach. I don't know. I mean, if you're pending free agents, or I'd have to look, you're going to tag Prescott. The salary cap's not expected to jump until next year, right? What was it, 224.8 to 255.4 million, which is ridiculous. So there's some thought that if you turn around and Dak plays well and you want to give him an extension, here you go, 2025. There's your deal. I think right now, I just put it up. He's currently scheduled to count almost 60 million against the 2024 salary cap. So, I mean, you probably got to convert 29 million in your sign-in bonuses. That would clear around 18 million in space. And then you get an automatic conversion with more than 22 million if 2 avoidable years are added to the contracts back end. Okay, great. CD Lamb, Micah Parsons, these guys are going to want contract extensions. They're going to want to get paid as well. So I feel as though we say this over the last several years. It's, make or break, make or break, make or break, make or break. I mean, this is why a team like Washington, when you've got a team like the Giants in the flux and pressure on the Eagles and pressure on the Cowboys and maybe wholesale changes coming, teams can kind of slide through the back door and win division, surprisingly. But if you're the Cowboys, I mean, I'm saying it now and last day in March, if you can't get it done with Dak and McCarthy next season, you have to go in a different direction. You have to.
And I think it's a lot of goodwill that they build up with Jerry Jones, who is their general manager on paper and their owner. So, and as I said earlier, Stephen Jones, his son, is kind of maybe he's CO right now, and he's helping his father run the team. And I think he's going to take the lead. And as you said, eventually they're going to have to bring in a real general manager who can architect this team and build it from the ground up. McCarthy has done a nice job, but they need championships there, and that's what they were used to for such a long time. And as you said, this is a make or break season, and there's so many. There's already coaches out there that don't have a job. You know, Belichick, Vrabel. You know what I mean? So there's coaches waiting for this type of opportunity, and I know we all joke about that Dallas is a high profile team and one of the NFL's top teams, and you know, it's a good landing spot for somebody in terms of coaching. So we're going to have to see if this will work out. But as you said, it's make or break season, and they just have so much age on this roster. They're going to have to figure out which guys are going to be able to make it to help them. So a lot of big decisions coming there, and I think they're going to start with Michael Gallup, one of their receivers. They're probably going to get rid of him. They gave him a good extension a couple years ago, try to get some of his cap money back, and then maybe they'll restructure one of these older offensive linemen. So, but a lot of big decisions in Dallas, and as you said, a lot of pressure on his team.
Yeah, speaking of pressure, Philadelphia Eagles, again, embarrassing loss to Tampa Bay. They decided to bring back Sirianni. They clean house as far as the coaching staff, the coordinators, respectively, bringing Fangio, guys that are probably sitting there maybe licking their chops. Hey, if Sirianni can't get it done, all these reports now are coming out. Played favorites, berating guys on the sidelines. I mean, it's just an absolute mess. AJ Brown has to call on Philly Sports Talk, which is a waste of a friggin' nickel or a dime if you're going to make that call, to be honest, to clear the air with the nonsense. I mean, the media has been relentless. Sports Talk Radio has been relentless. They're crushing the Eagles left and right. And listen, rightfully so. We still don't know what's happening with Kelsey. Johnson's getting older. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham wants to come back. We know the ones that are not going to come back. Jalen Hurts signed a lot of money. Hassan Reddick, now all of a sudden, hey, we love you. Thanks for your contributions, but we just don't see at your age and what we're trying to do going forward. You're going to be a fit. So he might be on the market, an opportunity to ink a deal with another team. A guy like Hassan Reddick, we'll start with him. I don't foresee him giving that hometown discount because he was already underpaid. And at this stage of his career, he's probably thinking to himself, I want to get paid, man. I mean, this might be my last big contract. I want to get mine, and rightfully so. Still plays at a high level, contributes on defense, but I don't believe the Eagles are going to bend and pay him what he believes he's worth and asking for at this stage of his career.
Get you a double-digit sack guy, but he's under contract to the Philadelphia Eagles, so that's for this upcoming 2024 season. And they hold the hammer. I always talk about that in these negotiations. They gave him the opportunity to seek a trade, but in the end, the Eagles are saying, okay, if it's good on advantageous to them type of deal, we'll do it. But a lot of times, it may be a holdout in pass. It may be
Yeah.
something going into training camp that we're still talking about, and Reddick has played very well for them. Maybe it's the scheme they're thinking about running with Vic Fangio coming in there as defensive coordinator. He may not fit. I just don't know what it is. But yeah, he could be a piece that they could move around the draft, but they're probably going to need to get a significant pick back, maybe a second round or
Well, that's
so.
what I was going to ask you. What is he worth right now? So 11 sacks, 38 tackles, 17 regular season games, recorded double-digit sacks for 4 consecutive seasons, led the team in that category, tied for 15th in the NFL. Good numbers, right? I mean, I think maybe had Nolan Smith taken that next step and showed that he can be a elite pass rusher, the idea would have been probably then to cut Reddick. You save about, let me pull it up, 10 million after dead money. So again, outside of the sacks, the numbers were poor by his standard. So at his age, the wear and tear, still productive, as I alluded to, what do you think he's worth?
Yeah, I mean, it could be as high as a second, maybe, but I'm looking probably more around the 3 range, maybe a third round draft pick. And the Eagles say, is that enough? But yeah, Nolan Smith, that's a very good call out you had there, Q, because last year they pick him in the first round, underachieved, plays the same position, and they need him to step up and kind of say, okay, he can replace Hassan Reddick, but is that really going to happen? Also, at defensive tackle, they're wondering, can Jordan Davis replace Fletcher Cox? Obviously, Cox at his age, he outperformed Jordan Davis
Yeah.
last year. So these are big question marks for this team, and a lot of question marks on this roster. Much like the Cowboys, they pinned everything on the 2 coordinators. They have 2 brand new coordinators coming in for the Eagles. Kellen Moore on offense, Vic Fangio on defense. So they're going to want to try to bring some of their guys in. You know how that is. They want to players that have performed for them in the past, like Kellen Moore, some Chargers are looking at them. Maybe some former Miami Dolphins that Fangio worked with. But the Eagles roster is also another one in flux because they have some age. At the receiver position, we talked about they have two high-end players in Brown and Smith, but behind them, they have a bunch of free agents
Yep.
and guys, they need to make some changes there. So they need to find a number three receiver. Offensive line, I think, is in flux as well with Jason Kelsey. I think it's just a matter of time before he announces his retirement. They're
Yeah.
going to have to figure that out, what they're doing there. Dallas Goedert at the tight end position, Q. They really didn't have somebody to be his, number two. So many teams are running two tight end sets. They need a tight end, and Goddard's always banged up. And then running back, DeAndre Swift, he's a free agent. Do they bring him back? And then defensively, we talked about Fletcher Cox, and this defense needs a total overhaul. Like, last year I was on them hard in terms of this defense was one of the lower ranked teams in the
Mm-hmm.
National Football League. You saw that in the last games. He lost 6 to 7 games down a stretch, and a lot of it is attributed to that defense. So you got to look at maybe strong safety where Kevin Byard came in. He's under contract, but do they bring him back? He's older. He did not play that well. Darius Slay, another guy. He had an injury coming down the stretch. Is he going to be healthy? Uh, do you bring back James Bradbury? Maybe corners in the area where
Yeah.
they need to look. Bradbury, I think, is done as well. And then safety, you have question marks for all because Reed Blankenship got hurt last year at that free safety position. So Eagles can go a variety of ways in the draft, but we know Howie Roseman likes to go offensive line or defensive line. That's probably where they'll probably put their eggs in that basket.
Yeah, Byard didn't help his cause with his comments about things leaking out. And as far as Kelsey, I don't think I think Kelsey retires. I think he's going to have too much fun. He'll do the podcast. He'll do TV. I think Fletcher Cox is done. Lane Johnson's getting up there as well. You mentioned Kelsey. You drafted Cam Jurgens in 2022 with the idea that he would eventually replace Kelsey at center, but they decided right guard, depending upon what happens. Again, they got Seo Apeta in free agency. You got the NFL draft, so maybe Jurgens remains in that position. Swift, I don't think he's coming back as well. Slay, again, that secondary, those guys got beat bad, man. Shoddy tackling, but how about again more reports coming out that Nick Sirianni playing favorites, berating guys on the sideline. I mean, my God, I just you can still turn around and get rid of them today if you wanted to. I just don't understand what the hell. All this is coming out now. All this stuff is leaking out. All these reports coming out in Philly. And I don't know how people can sit there and say it's much to do about nothing. It's not. I mean, it just seems like it's a ticking time bomb here on that sideline.
Yeah, it's a soap opera. It's old school dynasty for when I was a kid. Every week it's a twist, it's a turn, and usually Q the all season is great elixir. Everything gets cleaned, and you get new coaches, and you get new players, and new blood, and everybody gets rejuvenated. But already there's a cloud around this 2024 season for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it starts with the organizational dynamics in the locker room. There's still some guys in this locker room. You've heard reports, I've heard reports that their players just weren't getting along. And
No,
it was with each other, it was with some of the coaching staff members, and everybody obviously going to talk to those about the coordinators that were let go, and Brian Johnson and Sean Desai. But in the end, Sirianni is left there, and you start to question, as you were talking about, is he a leader of men? Can he fix this locker room? Just too many leaks going on, and you talk about players calling talk radio. I mean, when did you ever hear about that? Guys typically would say, "I don't even listen to this crap." I'm just about doing my job, and
yeah,
that's what this team needs to get about doing. They need to fix the situation. They won 11 games. They're a playoff team. There are some pieces there, but they have to clean it up and figure out what they're doing with all these free agents on their roster first and foremost, and then try to move forward. But It's a soap opera. They would have been fun. I would have loved to seen it. Hard Knocks would have been behind the cameras with these guys last year because there's just so much drama going on with that.
I got to ask you this before I let you get out of here. Mecole Hardman came out and said on the Pivot Pod, I guess he mentally checked out, pardon me, uh, with the Jets and didn't like the fact that, he was injured. They wanted him to field punts. He didn't trust special teams. He didn't trust Robert Saleh. There's a report that he was leaking the game plan to the Philadelphia Eagles. Basically told Kansas City, come and get me. I mean, this is like really, if you think about this, so the Jets believe he leaked game plans to the Chiefs, Eagles before games. Okay, so think about this. New York Jets believe that former player wide receiver Mecole Hardman leaked the team's game plans to Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles before Gang Green's game against them last October. This is from Connor Hughes, who's a pretty respectable guy. Like, I'm just trying to understand that. Like, if you checked out and you mentally have checked out, and then you claim that you begged the Chiefs to come get him, that's tampering if you think about it. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's funny because the Jets happen to play like two of their best games of the season against Kansas City and the Eagles. But besides that, I mean, they beat the Eagles. Their first loss in 11 games, 2014 at home. But I don't know, man. I just think that's kind of bush league, right? And if you're begging players to come and get you at a franchise that you played with, I mean, isn't that tampering?
You got a mess, and then they're another one. Already going in next season, there's a cloud over this team, and everybody said, "Oh, Harmon, a great signing." They brought in all those free agents last year, and just kind of a bunch of misfit pieces that did not come together. Q and we all know they all thought it was around Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt, but it, Robert Salah has got to control his team and a narrative. We hear a lot of stories coming out about this team as well, where just organizational dysfunction. And Hardman signed with them. You know what I mean? He was a free agent and he had his opportunity. And I guess they're all going to say, "Oh, I just wanted the opportunity to play with Aaron Rodgers." Well, you know what? He needs to be a professional.
Yeah.
And if he's doing these types of things, you don't want this guy part of your team. And obviously Andy Reid and Brett Veach have done a good job in terms of, keeping him in line, but the Jets just couldn't. So, it'd be interesting to see if there's fire where all the smoke is going on and um, you know, that Jets team going in this season already. Salah's on a hot seat. Joe Douglas on a hot seat. Aaron Rodgers, he's coming back, and I can't wait each week looking at that soap opera, seeing how that's going to play out. But yeah, the Jets another mess, and another player that went there that kind of regretted it, Hardman. And then you heard Cook kind of saying some of the same things as he was going to
Yeah.
Baltimore that he kind of regretted signing with the Jets too.
Yeah, and then lastly, the Tush-Push will live on. There was speculation that the off-used quarterback sneak, which, let's be honest, the Eagles ran it to perfection, was going to get banned. NFL Executive VP of Football Operations Troy Vincent confirmed Thursday the league will take no such action. I guess, remember too, Vincent played with the Philadelphia Eagles, but hey, it is what it is. I think the exact quote, I'm trying to pull it up, was, let me just find it here. You might have it in front of you. It was, I think it was, don't ban. Here it is. Don't punish a team that strategically does it well. So there you have it. So there will be more pushes of tushes come next season. Apparently, it didn't even come up to the league's competition committee. But yeah, I mean, listen, the Eagles' success rate, it's alarming. It's ridiculously high and ridiculously good. And if you can't stop it, I mean, look, prior to this, New England ran it with Brady. Let's be honest. The quarterback sneak, boom, 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 get to the line. Here you go. So there we have it. The tush push lives. It
Yeah,
continues.
and it's a play. It's much like remember the Wildcat when it first came out in 2008. Everybody was like, "Oh, how do we stop this?" It's basically single wing football. And you know what? Eventually, it kind of was like, "Oh, the defense coordinators got together
Yep.
and they figure out a way." And now it's kind of the way to dinosaur. So, we'll see where Tush-Push goes, because I think the success on it, Q, for the Eagles was, Jason Kelsey was a master at getting low underneath the guy in front of him, and then Hurts would go right behind him. So,
Yeah.
and we
Right.
saw that in the playoff game that the Bucs stopped them in a couple key
Right.
situations using that Tush-Push. So teams are figuring out a way how to stop it. But yeah, the Eagles, there was a huge article I read from the Athletic, and it broke down how the rule is what it is, but they kind of, you know, go right to the edge of it. You know what I mean?
Of
So
course.
it's going to be interesting in terms of, do they stop because sometimes the guys are pulling them, and it's not a real push. So uh got to figure out how to stop that formation, and I think a big thing is if someone gets hurt badly during that formation, they will make it a player safety type thing, but lives on for another season.
Yep, 100% with that. Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football 1029, The Game, part of the Broad Street South Network. Kind enough to always join us on BYP and on Q on this Thursday. All right, we'll continue with the NFC off-season needs. We'll go NFC North next week. And, listen, there's a lot of rumblings with some of these quarterbacks here and there. The draft's right around the corner. We will break it down, give Lloyd a follow on X as well, at Lloyd Vance. Always appreciate a couple moments, pal.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.